Republican FISA memo is now in the president's hands, so will he or won't he make it go public as memo mania sweeps Washington? How about that? Hang on, everybody. Good morning. I'm Bill Hemmer, live inside America's Newsroom, and good to be back with you today.
Good morning. Good to be back with you. It is memo mania.
It is, and Minneapolis is very cold, too.
Welcome back.
But you knew that. Yeah, nice to see you.
Sub-zero temps there. All right, I am Sandra Smith. Good morning. The House Intelligence Committee voting unanimously to release that classified Democratic memo that defends the federal investigation into a Trump campaign associate. But yesterday, President Trump called out Democrats in classic Trump form.
Oh, but did we catch them in the act or what? You know what I'm talking. Oh, did we catch them in the act? They are very embarrassed. They never thought they were going to get caught. We caught them. Hey, we caught them. Oh, it's so much fun. We're like the great sleuth.
Chief White House correspondent John Roberts joins us this morning. Hey, John.
Sandra, good morning to you. And that Democratic memo from the Intelligence Committee is here at the White House now, where the White House counsel's office and the NSC will conduct a 5-day review of it. The press secretary, Sarah Huckabee Sanders, in a statement saying this morning, quote, the White House has received a memorandum from the minority members of the House Select Permanent Committee on Intelligence. As stated many times, the administration will follow the same process and procedure with this memorandum from the minority as it did last week when it received a memorandum from the majority. This morning, though, the ranking member on the Intelligence Committee, Adam Schiff, said he has some concerns about what the White House may do with this memo in terms of redactions before it is ultimately released. Listen to what Schiff said.
I think that's going to be very hard for the White House. They've tried to make the case that they released the Nunes memo in the interest of transparency. So to say, well, we don't want the country to see this, I think is untenable. What I'm more concerned about, Allison, is that they make political redactions. That is, not redactions to protect sources or methods, which we've asked the Department of Justice and FBI to do, but redactions to remove information they think is unfavorable to the president. That could be a real problem, and that's our main concern.
So the White House now has 5 days to voice any concerns that they have with the memo. It will be difficult to see that they could raise legitimate objections unless there are things in that memo that really compromise sources and methods, because when you look at it, Sandra, they really wanted to get the Republican memo out. And I think it's pretty clear that this memo, at least from what we've heard, doesn't contain any information regarding sources and methods or other classified information that would warrant not releasing it from the public. So we'll find out, I think, in short order here from the White House.
We'll see where that goes. Meanwhile, John, as Fox reported, the president's attorneys are leaning against having him meet with special counsel Robert Mueller's wide-ranging interview. What do we know about that this morning?
Well, this is something, Sandra, that Fox has been reporting for weeks now, but the story bubbling up again. I'm told that the president's outside attorneys are leaning against the idea of having him sit down with Mueller. There's a little bit of a difference of opinion between the inside counsel, Ty Cobb, who is leaning toward an interview if the parameters for it are tenable for the president, because it might speed an end to the Mueller investigation. Then we have the two outside counsels, John Dowd and Jay Sekulow, who are of a little bit different mind, thinking that it wouldn't be a good idea. There's three reasons for that, really. First of all, where is there the evidence of a crime that has been committed that would warrant the special counsel talking to the president? Second, is there anything that the special counsel can learn from an interview with President Trump that he doesn't already know through the thousands upon thousands of pages of documents that the White House and the transition have provided? His outside counsel is reviewing a 1990s case involving Mike Espy, the Clinton Secretary of Agriculture, to say, look, you're getting all this information in the documents. Do you need that information by talking with the president? And third, with the level of detail that Robert Mueller has from all of the thousands upon thousands of pages of documents that the White House and the transition has produced, that would let the special counsel go down a number of rabbit holes that the president may not be familiar with. So that's another reason why they're inclined to not go ahead and do it. That said, negotiations toward an interview with the special counsel's office are continuing. It's just a matter of, is it necessary, and can they narrowly define the parameters enough that they know specifically what Mueller will ask the president and what the president will be expected to say? Sandra?
Good stuff. John Roberts, thank you.
Joining me now, Mercedes Slapp, White House Senior Strategic Communications Advisor from the North Lawn. Mercedes, good morning and welcome back here to America's Newsroom. Has the president seen that Democratic memo?
The White House has received the memo from the minority members of the House Select Permanent Committee. I do not know if the president himself has seen it personally. I know it's going through the same process and procedure that we did with the previous memo. This means that it's going to be reviewed by the national security team as well as the legal team. And again, go through the same review process that we saw with the previous memo.
Okay, that maybe answers my next question. Will he declassify it, Mercedes?
Well,
yes
again, you know, the president has up to 5 days to make that decision. It will be going through the same process and procedure that we saw with the previous memo.
But do you have any sense of where he is on that as of
You know, again,
this hour?
this takes time to review. It has to go through the national security team and the legal team as well, Bill.
Okay, if there are redactions, Democrats are going to make a case out of that. But maybe sources and methods need to be protected. I don't know what's in the memo and if redactions are necessary. How will the White House defend a redaction?
Well, again, I think that's for the national security team and for our legal team to look through the memo, go through the same process as we've seen. You know, I think when you look at the first memo that was released and declassified, it clearly showed that there was serious concerns that were raised from these higher levels of the Department of Justice, in particular the FBI, showing political bias on using a dossier. It was a campaign opposition research memo that they used in order to give these FISA warrants. This was it's alarming. And so I think it's very clear for the president to ensure that that information got out there with this memo that was released, the Nunes memo last week. And
right, if there is a redaction, Mercedes, I guess this is what I'm driving at here. Will you get the FBI to defend a redaction if it happens that way?
Well, you know, again, I really think that you have the Congress goes through its own process of determining what if they feel the sources or the methods that should be included or not included.
Understood.
It goes through a process here at the White House as well that they look through. And of course, the key here is to protect national security, that being of utmost importance here in the White House, as well as providing the information needed so that the American people can see if there was political bias associated with the process that some of those in the Department of Justice.
Okay, we'll wait on that.
Forward.
Two more topics to get to. We'll see what comes of the previous discussion we're having there. On Robert Mueller's investigation, will the president talk to him or his team?
Well, I refer you to the president's personal lawyer. Again, as the president has mentioned, it will be up to the attorneys to make that decision.
Well, there's a risk in speaking with this team. You would concede that. And there's also a risk in not speaking to him, be it politically. How do you gauge that or weigh it?
Well, I have to tell you, this White House has been very cooperative with the special counsel as well as the congressional investigations. We've provided dozens of witnesses as well as thousands of pages of documentation. As we continue to see, there has been no collusion. We want to stay focused on the agenda of the American people. We want to be talking about the successful economic story that we're seeing where jobs are being created, wages are increasing, and families are receiving paycheck increases as well. We will continue to be focused on, obviously, the fight this week happening on the Hill with the CR that's expiring, the continuing resolution
48
expiring on
hours
Thursday.
From now. Yeah,
right,
you're right.
and focusing on immigration reform as well, something the president wants to focus on.
When will the president make a decision on this? Is it days away or weeks away still?
A decision, I apologize.
On speaking with Mueller's team.
Again, I refer you to his personal attorney. It's up to them to decide how to proceed forward. We, again, stay very focused on ensuring the president today, for example, is getting briefed on the issue of MS-13, something that impacts communities across the country with increasing violence, something the president wants to take care of, ensure that we are able to provide safe communities for Americans.
Important topic, indeed.
Very important topic that the president wants to make sure we push forward on. And here's another one. What does the president want the American people to understand about the wild ride on the markets yesterday and likely again today? Well, obviously, we're concerned about setbacks that happen in the stock market. But with that being said, we're looking at the long-term, strong economic fundamentals. What we're seeing is a strengthened economic growth, increased wages. We're focused on the fact that there's been the lowest unemployment that we've seen in a long time. And there's confidence in our businesses, consumer confidence as well at an all-time high. So, Bill, I really think that for the president, he's very focused on ensuring that we are seeing these strong benefits coming from the tax cut law, as well as the deregulation component that, as we know, when you have those two put together, in addition to investing in our infrastructure,
those are the strong fundamentals that we need for economic growth, which, as we have witnessed, is happening right now in terms of when you look at our GDP growth and the fact that you've seen our wages increase
and let's
at a
keep it moving.
high.
I think we can all agree on that. Last question. Did the president sing the praises of the Dow, of a rising Dow, too loudly and too often, Mercedes? No,
I mean, I think that when you look at it under this president, you've seen the Dow go up 7,000 points. We've created $8 trillion in wealth. You're seeing corporations saying we're moving back to America. America's open for business. We're creating jobs in America. You look at those strong economic fundamentals, and that's a very positive story to tell. And that success has been under President Trump's time. When you look at President Obama, he had given up on our manufacturing sector. What have we seen under President Trump's time? We've seen manufacturing jobs coming back. We have real economic growth. And I think that the key is you're seeing that our American families are benefiting because of the president's policies and his leadership.
Thank you for the message this morning. Thank you for answering the questions you could. More to come. Please come back. Mercedes Schlapp from the North Lawn. All right, 10 minutes past the hour, and the market's going to move in 20 minutes.
It's looking like
we know that.
Another triple-digit sell-off on the open, so we'll be watching that one. All right, we will have much more on this second memo crafted by Democrats that you just heard about from the White House. Next up, we'll speak with a Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee, California Congressman Eric Swalwell is here, and we'll try and find out what's in their version. Plus, there's this.
Can you imagine if the shoe was on the other foot and Donald Trump or George Bush or Karl Rove had paid for information and then George W. Bush's FBI had opened an investigation into the Obama campaign? This town would be on fire.
Well, that's the chairman of the committee, Republican Devin Nunes, railing against the mainstream media, accusing it of ignoring the importance of the Republican FISA memo. We'll analyze reaction in the media with Howie Kurtz a bit later this hour. Coming up.
Plus, President Trump blasting Democrats over their criticism of tax reform, comparing Nancy Pelosi's crumbs comment to Hillary Clinton's deplorables.
I think her statement, crumbs, will be equivalent, and I said this the other day for the first time. When I first heard the word deplorable, I thought it was a bad thing, but I had no idea it was not going to be good for our opponent.
What did they say for 10 days? They said that our memo came to all sorts of conclusions. Our memo didn't come to any conclusions. Our memo just listed facts. And their memo, people will see, they actually come to conclusions and have personal attacks on myself and Chairman Gowdy.
So that was Congressman Nunes with Sean Hannity last night, speaking on the backlash that he thinks Republicans are getting right now. House Intel Committee voting to release the counter memo prepared by its Democratic members. So California Democrat Eric Swalwell is on that House Democratic Committee. Sir, how you doing? And good to have you on our program right here.
Good morning, Bill. Thanks for having me on.
As you well know, no Democrat voted with the Republicans last week. But every Republican voted to make the Democratic memo public yesterday. Now, why do you think that was?
Well, the public sentiment was that they wanted the full picture, and Democrats didn't believe that in an ongoing investigation that the public or subjects or witnesses in the investigation, like the White House and White House staff members, should see evidence that is being used in the case, which now is open and out there. But the memo really distorted the state of the evidence and what was obtained through the FISA process. And so we wanted to provide a clearer picture. But, Bill, also doing something that the Republicans were not willing to do, which was to first send ours to the Department of Justice and ask that they scrub anything that would compromise sources and methods.
If it goes public, we can then debate that, sources and methods then. But it just seems from afar that both sides are working the ref. But I think here's the question now. What is the fundamental difference in your version from the Republican version?
Ours bolsters the credibility of the FBI to point out that they actually did go through the correct process, that a voluminous amount of evidence was presented to the FISA court, that they mischaracterized Andy McCabe's testimony to our committee, also that they did disclose to the court that there was a political motivation of one of the witnesses in a much larger package that was submitted.
Now, that's a very interesting point on the political motivation. Did the court know that it came from a team working on behalf of Hillary Clinton?
No, actually, that was masked, Bill. And typically, in applications like this, you limit the court's knowledge of actually naming individuals. You want them to know that there's a bias, which was disclosed, but you want to protect the U.S. persons and also have the court make an impartial ruling. Again, this was also just to launch an investigation. It wasn't a closing argument made to a jury for a proof beyond a reasonable doubt standard.
But if it came from a competing presidential campaign, is that not relevant?
And that was disclosed, that there was a likely political motivation, and the court weighed that and still granted the application.
But when you say that, it just appears as if that definition is overly broad, as opposed to presenting the case and saying it came from the DNC or it came from those who want to make Hillary Clinton president. I just think that's relevant, and we need to recognize that.
Well, I think what's relevant is that there was a bias, but the evidence was so overwhelming, the application was granted anyway. I think the bigger picture here is, let's get back to work now. Both memos will be out for the public. Let's start interviewing witnesses again so we can tell the American people what happened.
Okay, and when we get to that, we will make it public. Last question. Yeah. Do you support making that application before that FISA judge? Should we see that? Would you support making that public?
I think that the committee should see it first, Bill. That's part of the problem here, is that only Trey Gowdy and Adam Schiff have seen the actual application. And so we should see it first. And then if it doesn't, again, compromise sources and methods, of course the public should see it. But the larger issue here is this is an ongoing investigation. The FBI is not above the law. They are, they should be scrutinized, but after the investigation. And right now, this is a play-by-play review while they're trying to still interview witnesses, and we're setting a precedent of sending evidence over to potential targets. You would never tell a suspect the evidence you had against them before you interviewed them, and I'm afraid that's what's going on here.
I hope we get to see it all. Sir, and I hope you come back.
So do I. I would love to.
The Democrat from California is Eric Swalwell. Thank you, sir, for your time today.
My pleasure.
You bet. 20 minutes past the hour now. Here we go.
And we are now just minutes away from the opening bell on Wall Street after a wild ride yesterday. The Dow dropping nearly 1,200 points. It's on its way lower, it looks like, again this morning. 10 minutes away. So what can we expect? We will have Maria Bartiromo on set to give us some insight. We are just minutes away from a very big day on Wall Street, potentially another big sell-off after that dramatic sell-off that we saw yesterday. The Dow dropping nearly 1,200 points to finish the session, its biggest one-day point drop in history. Though in percentage terms, it's not a record. Let's bring in Maria Bartiromo, the anchor of Mornings with Maria on the Fox Business Network. Maria, important to point also that the Dow has now given up every point that it gained since the president signed tax reform into law. What does all this mean?
It's a really good point, actually, that now the market is negative for 2018. You still have trillions of dollars in market value gains since the election, but the 18 gains have been wiped out. Look, Sandra, you know that everybody was looking for a sell-off, and we were sort of waiting, what's going to be the catalyst? What's going to be the catalyst? The catalyst ended up being higher wages, higher inflation, and higher interest rates, which makes sense. That's what happens with any market. When you see rates start going up, there's competition for stocks. So people start questioning, do I want to be in treasuries or do I want to be in the stock market where I can have a bigger reward but also a bigger risk? So, look, I like the way this feels. I'll be honest with you. I do not mind this. I think this feels good. It feels like it's opening an opportunity for people to get in. Longer term, I think this is probably a buying opportunity. My 2 cents.
Why in such dramatic fashion, though? Why isn't this sort of a steady, controlled sell-off then? If it's a healthy correction for the stock market, which, as I understand it, in 5 minutes, we're opening in correction territory potentially.
Yeah, we're down 8.5% on the Dow Jones Industrial Average, and as you know, a correction officially is 10% from the high, so we're down 8.5% from then. We got another, 1.5% to go in terms of correction material. But whether it's 8.5 or 10%, I still think you want to pick hairs. You want to look at the fundamental backdrop for the market, and what you see is a pretty good situation.
So here's the dramatic day we saw yesterday. Markets open in just a couple minutes, so we want to make sure we're back for the opening bell. Tying this to politics, the president has owned this stock market rally, touting it almost daily, whether in the form of a tweet or a speech. Is he going to own this sell-off. The White House at the top of the hour said, look, we see it, but we're looking at long-term economic growth.
Yeah, I mean, look, generally speaking, you really don't want the commander-in-chief to be talking about the stock market or public markets. Look what happened to the dollar when Stephen Mnuchin told the truth.
Right.
And that is that, you know, a weak dollar is better for trade. Oh, no kidding. So, you know, you generally don't want the leader of the free world to be talking about it, but he has, and he's owned it. So generally speaking, he probably should come out and say something like, hey, you know, hang in there or whatever, because long-term, he's right. The fundamentals of this economy and the backdrop of the stock market's very strong. We're talking about 5.4% growth now for the first quarter. That's what the Atlanta Fed came out.
GE reported this morning stronger than expected results.
General Motors came out and it was better than expected. The stock was up.
Yeah, there you go. All right, Maria, thank you for being here. We are going to leave it there because just a few minutes from now, the stock market will open. And Bill, at one point this morning, Dow futures were off more than 400 points. They're off those lows now.
Good stuff. Thank you, ladies. In a moment here, watching for the Dow open. Meanwhile, the mudslinging between the White House and Democrats reaching new levels. And yesterday, the president not holding back when he was in Cincinnati, Ohio.
They would rather see Trump do badly, okay, than our country do well. That's what it means. Somebody said treasonous. I mean, yeah, I guess why not? You know. Can we call that treason?
All right, you asked for it, you got it. Here it is. The Dow 30 now open for business at 9:30 here in New York. And as the bell tapers off in the background, this is where we start today. At the open, down about 500 points. And we should point out that selling overseas was intense overnight. And the futures market about 5 o'clock this morning indicated a drop such as this.
It's a great point.
Now, the futures came back a little bit too, but now this is reflecting what we were watching about 5 o'clock.
Here we are, about a minute into trading, Dow selling off 500 plus points. Maria sort of putting things in perspective there, and it's something to watch. Circuit breakers. In order to control selling, if it gets to that point, we saw a big drop yesterday, could get there today. There are circuit breakers at 7% drop, 13%, 20%. So there are measures that the market professionals take in order to avoid. Remember that May flash crash that we saw back in 2010? So we'll keep watching it.
Here's what I'm thinking about here, Sandra. You know, the day of the election, going back 14 months, the Dow was at 18,600. And then we moved over the next 14 months, the Dow 26,600. So that's a move of 8,000 points. It's pretty remarkable stuff. So now we've come back about roughly 2,100, 2,200 points. And what you folks talk about, formerly in your previous life at Fox Business, is that a correction of 10% sometimes can be healthy. A correction of 20% is bear market territory.
Correct.
We're not at bear market territory, but the correction has been set in because we're clearly off 10% plus.
Oh yeah,
that's the highs.
We opened in correction territory there now, and some people will use that measure as a buying opportunity, which was why Maria was saying earlier it doesn't bother her, which is an interesting way to look at this market. It can scare a few people.
The other thing you and I talk about a lot, you know, during the commercials and all that stuff is the small investor really did not take advantage. If you were contributing to 401k, yeah, you're in it. But the small investor who would buy a company here or buy a company
or an
really,
ETF.
really did not participate in the run-up over the past year. And only in the last month has the small investor come into this market. And a lot of the reason for that, they'll explain to you, is the bruise or the burn they still feel from 2008 or 2009.
They got in January, for the most part, to your point, and that's when you saw those record after record stock market breaking days. And then we reached that record up 45% under President Trump in late January. And so some of that sort of getting worked out of the market now. Obviously, that's one way to look at it. Higher bond yields playing a part here. Inflation talk by the Federal Reserve. But look at this. Look at this. Bill, just a minute or two ago, it was down more than 500 points. So you're looking at an incredibly volatile U.S. stock market. And you were pointing out the sell-off we saw globally overnight. It's spooking the global markets
a little
as well
bit too.
to see this.
I think locally, too, there's a political equation to all of this, and I think we need to recognize it. The past year, the president has been quick to tout, as he did the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, you know, what the stock market's doing. And that's great because it's building wealth in America. It's building wealth in capitalism. But is there a risk when you sell the Dow so much? Do you ride it on the way down like you ride it on the way up? And I would argue you do. What Mercedes Schlapp from the White House told us a few moments ago
ago, is that if you're in it for the long haul, believe in America, invest in America, and buy America. And I think that's what you're.
So that's the message from the White House this morning. If you're wondering what their thoughts are on this, they said we're looking at long-term economic growth. And we're going to talk to Senator Marco Rubio in a little bit. Maybe ask him about the markets. No, but I mean, it's what everybody's talking about, because these are significant moves. And just since we've been talking, we've been seeing triple-digit swings in either direction. It's pretty amazing that we started out down more than 500 points, and here we are, but still, 200 points off the lows.
But even on that, you're still up 6,000 points in the Dow 30.
Perspective is everything. Just a 1% loss there. All right, we'll keep our eye on that. Meanwhile, President Trump calling out House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi in classic Trump form during his speech in Cincinnati last night. The president likening Pelosi's crumbs comment to Hillary's deplorables campaign gaffe. Let's just go to the tape.
So Nancy Pelosi again said that's crumbs. So I think her statement, crumbs, will be equivalent. And I said this the other day for the first time. When I first heard the word deplorable, I thought it was a bad thing, but I had no idea it was not going to be good for our opponent. It was not a good day for her. And I think this is not a good day for Nancy Pelosi. She's our secret weapon. I just hope they don't change her. There are a lot of people that want to run her out. She's really out there. Now I'm supposed to make a deal with her.
Marie Harp is the former spokeswoman for the State Department, and Lawrence Jones is editor-in-chief of campusreform.org. And Lawrence, I feel like just leaving it right there. I mean, your thoughts after listening to all of that?
I love it. The President of the United States get the pulse of the American people. The Democrats will not be competitive, Sandra, until they overthrow their leadership. Republicans have to do the same thing. The establishment is so furious that Donald Trump got elected. And so as a result, we were able to get things done as a party. The Democrats haven't been able to do that. They like to keep the same old people in. And as a result, you have people like Nancy Pelosi that are tone deaf to the American people. How can you call tax cuts for people that are living paycheck to paycheck crumbs?
You know, you really wonder if that is going to haunt her and her party as we head into midterms. Marie, is Nancy Pelosi an asset to your party?
Well, I think in the midterms, so much of what we've talked about is that these really are district by district races. And look, the number of places we need to win as Democrats to take the House, a number of those districts actually were won by Hillary Clinton in 2016. So I think that Nancy Pelosi is overall probably a liability in some places, but I think the Republicans might be overplaying that hand a little bit if they think solely because she's unpopular in many places that they can keep the House. I would also say, Sandra,
you know she controls a lot because she has the money. And you know everything is about the money, and she's a fundraiser. She's admitted it in the past, and she controls a lot of these districts and these congressmen by the money and her influence.
I think that you're using an outdated version of Democratic politics. There are people like Joe Crowley and Seth Moulton who have their own super PACs and just normal PACs today that are raising money for candidates across this country. And that, look, if and when the Democrats take the House back this November, I do think you will see a serious challenge to Nancy Pelosi, her leadership of the party. And I think that Republicans are really miscalculating if they think they can hold the House solely because there are some places that don't like Nancy Pelosi. There are a lot of districts that voted for Hillary Clinton for president.
That performance at the president's State of the Union address the other night, that rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, Lawrence. And the president he continues to respond to that evening and the act of Democrats to not stand during many moments. The president calling un-American and treasonous. Right. Listen to this, Lawrence.
You're up there. You've got half the room going totally crazy, wild. They loved everything. And you have the other side. They were like death. And un-American. Un-American. Somebody said treasonous. I mean, yeah, I guess why not? I mean, they certainly didn't seem to love our country very much.
Lawrence?
It's unbelievable because a lot of the issues that the president talked about was directly affecting the American people now. It wasn't so much as the politics. Look, if they want to sit down over political differences, I get it. But they sat down when the president talked about low unemployment numbers for the black community. Meanwhile, they're willing to shut down the government over illegal immigrants. And so when you're going into the midterms having that message, shutting down the government over illegals, and then you can't even stand and clap for the president when he puts the American people first, good luck in the midterms.
Marie, how did you feel about that moment and the president's reaction to it?
Well, I think the president calling dissent treason, like he did basically yesterday, is really offensive and over the line. But look, I'm not sure the president's ever watched a State of the Union. This is always what happens. The party who's not in the presidency doesn't tend to stand and clap. Actually, we had a Republican congressman yell, "You lie," at Barack Obama. So I think the State of the Union is interesting for those of us who maybe watch politics very closely. What the American people are focused on is not who stands up at the State of the Union. It is a message going into the midterm where Democrats are saying we have better policies, we have a better way, and the Republicans haven't delivered for you like they promised.
Last word, got to go.
Well, Marie, you saw the CBS poll. You saw the number of independent voters that believe that the president delivered a great State of the Union, and 42% of Democrats thought he did a pretty good job.
And that's not going to matter come midterm time. The polls that matter are how people feel about the future, and Democrats are winning in every single one.
Oh, I've got to leave it there. Lawrence and Marie, good to have you both on this morning. Good to see you.
Thanks, Sandra.
Thanks, Sandra.
They should keep talking because the Dow's it's just climbing right now.
They're like something.
Eagles quarterback Nick Foles, fresh off the win, is heading for a family vacation. Have you heard? Little fist pump for Mickey there down in Florida. Swarms of fans gathered during the parade down Disney's Main Street to see the MVP. He threw 3 touchdowns, caught one on Sunday, and the Philadelphia Eagles are your Super Bowl champion.
A much-deserved celebration.
Yes.
Are you thawing out from the cold yet, by the way?
A little bit. Minneapolis, fantastic job to the city and everybody up there. St. Paul as well, wonderful job. It was chilly.
Glad to hear that.
I will say it was cold, but, you're from Illinois.
Chicago.
I'm from Ohio. We should be used to this. But once you get away from
I told you to layer up. There's no such thing as bad weather, just bad clothing.
I was layered in a big way. And it was a wonderful game. That stadium is phenomenal, and I think, hats off to the folks in Minnesota for welcoming all of us.
It was a great game. All right. Well, the president's son slamming Democrats amid the uproar over the release of that Republican written memo.
We have to open everything up. Listen to the Democratic memo. I'm sure that'll be a winner, given that Schiff is doing this and everything he's been spreading for a long time. But you can see the fear in their eyes, because the one thing is we've always been in a very one-sided battle.
Meanwhile, one top Republican saying if the shoe were on the